Officer Elias Crow thought he'd seen every hard thing a winter shift could throw at a man, but nothing prepared him for the moment his daughter stopped dead in the snow, her mittened hand clutching his coat, as if the world had suddenly tilted. "Daddy, why is that police dog only $1? Junia's small voice shook, not with cold, but with something deeper, fear, disbelief, a child's instinct that something terribly wrong was unfolding. Elias expected to see a stray, maybe an abandoned pet near the dumpsters behind the supermarket, but when he followed her trembling finger, his breath locked in his chest. There, half buried in slush beside the trash pile, lay a German shepherd once proud enough to lead entire K9 units. Now he shivered against the metal bins, his fur matted with frost, one leg wrapped in filthy cloth. A warped cardboard sign hung from his neck, the letters crooked and cruel. $1, injured working dog. What happened to Bishop, and why someone wanted him forgotten, would unravel a truth darker than the storm rolling over Frosthaven. Stay with us, because this story will break your heart, then restore your faith. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Winter's last light fell dim over Frosthaven as snow drifted lazily across the narrow service path behind the town's aging supermarket. Elias Crow, a 37-year-old patrol officer whose broad shoulders and prematurely lined eyes hinted at too many winters spent on duty, walked with his 7-year-old daughter Junia toward home. He was a tall man with a square jaw softened only by a neatly kept beard, the kind of beard grown by someone who had once cared deeply about appearances but now wore it mostly out of habit. His dark hair curled slightly at the ends, where his cap no longer covered, and his gait, steady, protective, betrayed a man who had long carried both duty and regret inside his chest. Junia, by contrast, moved with the feather-light bounce of a child whose world was still full of magic. She had chestnut braids tucked beneath a purple knit hat, bright berry-red cheeks from the cold, and eyes as quick and curious as sparrow wings. She hummed a little tune only she understood, swinging her father's hand as if trying to pull him into her rhythm. Elias admired her warmth silently, grateful she had inherited nothing of the heaviness that sometimes settled over him after long shifts. They were joking about whether snowflakes had personalities. Junia insisted shy flakes melted faster when she suddenly froze mid-step. Her hand tightened around his, small but urgent. Elias followed her stare toward the open stretch behind the industrial dumpsters, where Frosthaven's trash collected before the weekly trucks came. A man stood there waving his arm as if trying to flag down invisible customers. He was tall but hunched, wrapped in a frayed leather jacket patched with duct tape. His beard was scraggly, gray threads twisting through black, and crude tattoos crawled along his neck and knuckles, symbols Elias recognized as the kind picked up in county jail rather than an ink shop. His name, Elias would later learn, was Reddick Morrow, but even now Elias instinctively felt the unsettling aura of someone who had lived too long at the edge of trouble. Reddick's eyes were narrow, restless, the eyes of a man who never looked at people, only past them, calculating. "Anybody want a dog?" he shouted, voice cracking in the cold. $1! Take him so I don't have to toss him somewhere else." At his feet lay a German shepherd, large but painfully thin, his once strong body shrunken beneath a coat of dark fur matted by melted snow and neglect. One hind leg was wrapped in a filthy strip of cloth, stiff with old blood and dirt. Around his neck hung a warped cardboard sign, uneven letters scrawled with a marker that had run in the wet. $1. Injured dog, no use. The shepherd's breath came out in fragile bursts, turning to pale mist that drifted away almost as quickly as it formed. He didn't lift his head fully. Only his tired brown eyes rose, dull as old amber, yet full of something that tightened Elias's chest, resignation. Mixed with a flicker of memory, Junia whispered, her voice small, trembling in the cold air. "Daddy, why would someone sell a dog next to a trash pile? He's freezing." She stepped closer, instinctively drawn to the creature, but Elias caught her hood gently. Something twisted inside him, a muscle memory from another life, one filled with barking, training courses, long night patrols shoulder to shoulder with a partner who had saved his life more than once. He took a slow step forward, staring hard at the shepherd, searching the angles of its muzzle, the tilt of one ear, the faded patch of lighter fur above its left eye. Snowflakes landed on the dog's nose. It didn't shake them off. Instead, the shepherd blinked slowly, almost apologetically, as though he feared even existing might bother someone. And then, barely, painfully, he lifted his head. The small motion revealed the truth Elias had not dared to expect. The subtle asymmetry from an old training injury, the familiar shape of his brow ridge, the faint ghost of a scar across the shoulder. Elias felt the world contract into a single heartbeat. His breath caught, his throat closed. The noise of the distant road and the metallic clatter of dumpsters faded until all he heard was the soft crunch of Junia shifting beside him. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked softly, sensing the sudden weight in him. Elias didn't answer, couldn't, because the dog lying in the slush, offered up like broken trash, was not a stranger. It was Bishop, the K9 who had vanished months earlier, the partner the department claimed had been lost during inter-facility transport, a phrase Elias had never trusted but had been too exhausted to fight. Bishop was older now, maybe 8 or 9, his once fearless posture replaced by the curled shape of a soul taught to expect pain. Yet the eyes, those warm, steady eyes that had once waited for Elias's smallest cue, were unmistakable. Elias felt a tremor move down his spine, a cold that went deeper than the winter air. Bishop had been loyal beyond reason, unbreakable, and now here he was, discarded beside a frozen trash yard, wearing a $1 price tag. Junia tugged his sleeve again. "Daddy, that dog knows you." And though Elias had not spoken a word, Bishop's gaze answered for him, soft and trembling, as if saying, "I remember you, but I'm not the same." That was the moment Elias Crow realized nothing about this night would remain simple, and nothing about Bishop's disappearance had ever been an accident. The cold deepened around the Frosthaven dump yard as evening settled, snowflakes thickening into slow-falling shards of white that drifted through the air like tired feathers. Elias Crow kept his tall, broad frame angled protectively toward his daughter, his dark hair damp from melting snow, and his jaw tight with the kind of tension that came from seeing something he had thought impossible. Junia, with her purple knit hat and bright chestnut braids, pressed herself closer behind him, her small gloved hand gripping the fabric of his coat as though it were the last warm thing in the world. Reddick Morrow watched them with a sideways smirk, shifting his weight from one boot to the other. Up close, the man looked even rougher than before, deep-set wrinkles carved into his wind-burned skin, a thin scar slicing down his cheek, and the half-rotted leather jacket hanging from his shoulders, as if it had given up trying to keep him warm years ago. Snow clung to his patchy beard, and the tattoos crawling across his knuckles stood out in stark black against the bluish tinge of his fingers. He was the type of man who had learned to laugh at pain because the world had long ago stopped offering him anything else. "I told you," Reddick said, kicking at a dumpster just hard enough to make Bishop flinch. "Picked him up at the tree line near the ridge. Dog like that ain't good for anything anymore. Legs busted, nerves shot. He's just scrap metal with fur." Elias stiffened. Behind the weary lines of his eyes flickered something darker, an echo of nights spent with Bishop running beside him, the jolt of adrenaline when the shepherd lunged to pull him off collapsing beams, the unspoken trust between a handler and his K9 partner. Those memories, once neatly stored away, now cracked open like ice under weight. He crouched slowly, lowering his tall frame so Bishop could see his face clearly. His breath steamed the cold air as he whispered, "Bishop, is that really you?" The German shepherd responded with a faint, fragile growl, not a warning, but the weary reflex of an animal conditioned to expect the next touch to hurt. The sound faded almost instantly, swallowed by snow and silence. Bishop's brown eyes flicked up, glazed with exhaustion, but carrying a depth of sorrow that pierced straight through Elias's ribs. The dog's once strong body trembled, his injured leg tucked tight against his belly, as though protecting what little strength he had left. Junia stepped forward before Elias could stop her. Her small face was flushed from cold and emotion, her voice trembling but fiercely protective. "Daddy, we can't leave him. He's good. He's scared." Her words, simple and pure, hung in the air like a truth no adult had been brave enough to say. Elias scanned Bishop's battered form. The shepherd's coat, once thick and dark, was now dull, tangled, and clumped with icy shards. Faint scars latticed his chest and ribs. Some were old, pale lines, and others still raw, reddened from recent injury. The bandage around his hind leg was soaked and stiff, wrapped in a way no medic or handler would ever approve. Elias's heart dropped as he realized the leg had not merely been injured. It had been restrained, likely caught in something cruel, something intentional. Reddick snorted. "Look, you want the mutt? Pay up, $1. I got no use for a limping dog, shame to drag him all the way to the landfill." His tone was flat and careless, but his eyes held the jittery shiftiness of someone hiding more than he admitted. "What happened to him?" Elias asked, rising to his full height. The question came out low, edged with something colder than the wind. Reddick shrugged, pulling a bent cigarette from his pocket, though he didn't light it. "Dunno. Dogs get hurt. Maybe he picked the wrong fight. Maybe someone got tired of feeding him. Who cares?" Elias's jaw flexed. He cared, because Bishop had never been reckless, never wandered, never left his partner's side unless ordered. And because the department's explanation for Bishop's disappearance had never made sense. A missing transport file, a quick dismissal, too many loose ends. The truth, whatever it was, wasn't going to be found through Reddick's half-truths. But Bishop's eyes, those eyes told Elias more than words ever could. The shepherd stared at him with a trembling intensity, as if pleading for recognition or forgiveness or simply for someone to stop walking past him. Snow collected on Bishop's muzzle, melting into the raw skin beneath, yet he didn't shake it off. That passivity alone made Elias's stomach twist. Bishop used to be relentless, alert, proud. A piece of Elias's heart cracked. Junia, seeing none of the tactical details but all of the hurt, knelt directly in the snow. "Hi, Bishop," she whispered, her breath forming tiny clouds. "It's okay. You don't have to be scared." Her small voice carried something extraordinary, gentleness untouched by fear. Bishop's ears twitched, his breathing hitched, then just for an instant his tail gave the faintest broken tremor. Elias swallowed hard. Bishop remembered them. Even in this state, his loyalty had not fully died. Reddick's laugh shattered the fragile moment. "Heartwarming. Now pay, officer. I ain't got all night." Elias turned his gaze on the man, his blue-gray eyes sharpening with a quiet authority that came from years of training. "Where exactly did you find him?" Reddick hesitated. A flicker of something, fear, recognition, guilt flashed behind his eyes. He scratched at his beard, shifting his feet. "Told you. Edge of the forest, near the old hunter's trail. Dogs get dumped there all the time." Elias didn't miss the discomfort in the man's posture. He also noticed how Reddick avoided looking at Bishop's injured leg or the nearly faded patch of fur where the canine identification tattoo should have been. Reddick knew more, maybe not everything, but more than he wanted to admit. Before Elias could push further, Junia's voice cut through the cold again, stronger than before. "Daddy, he doesn't belong in the trash. He was trying to be brave." Her words ignited something deep inside Elias. A protector, a father, a partner who had failed once and would not fail again. He faced Reddick and reached into his coat. "Fine, $1. Reddick nodded eagerly, but his eyes darted around with the wariness of a man who feared witnesses. Elias filed that reaction away for later, but right now, Junia, Bishop, the brutal cold, these were the things that mattered. As Elias stepped toward Bishop, he saw the shepherd try to lift himself, as though mustering the last bit of strength to greet him. The effort failed. His injured leg buckled, and he let out a soft, pained whine that stabbed straight through Elias's chest. Elias knelt, lowering his voice to a tremble. "It's okay, boy. I've got you." Bishop's eyes softened, trust flickering like a dying flame fighting to stay alive. And in that moment, Elias understood. Bishop had been hurt, hidden, and abandoned for a reason. Someone had tried to erase him, and now fate had placed him back into Elias's hands. Nothing about this was coincidence. Nothing. Snow hammered the windshield as Elias Crow sped through Frosthaven's narrow streets, the storm now a swirling wall of white that erased distance and depth. His large hands, rough from years of patrol work, gripped the steering wheel so tightly the leather creaked. Beside him in the back seat, Bishop lay stretched across Junia's lap, his once strong chest rising shallowly beneath a coat dull with frost and neglect. Junia, small and trembling in her purple knit hat, pressed both gloved hands against the shepherd's ribs, as though she could keep warmth inside him by sheer will. Her cheeks were blotched red from crying, yet her brown eyes stayed fixed on Bishop with a fierce, terrified determination only a child could hold. When they burst through the sliding doors of Frosthaven Veterinary Clinic, a squat brick building with flickering fluorescent lights, Dr. Mirella Hanlon was already hurrying forward. She was in her early 40s, tall, with long limbs that moved with the disciplined precision of someone who had learned to survive chaos. Her dark auburn hair was tied back in a messy knot, wisps escaping around a sharp-boned face lined lightly at the corners from years of sleepless emergency calls. Her hazel eyes, however, were steady, calm, and impossibly gentle. Eyes of someone who had seen suffering but never grown numb to it. "What happened?" she asked, her voice low but urgent. "Collapsed," Elias said, lifting Bishop's limp body onto the examination cart. She rolled toward him. "Legs broken. He's dehydrated, and he's got old injuries all over him." His voice cracked on the last words, and he hated himself for it. Dr. Hanlon ran her hands carefully along Bishop's flank, her fingertips pausing where the skin dipped unnaturally or twitched. "Get him on fluids," she called to a vet tech, a young man named Porter Dale, short and wiry with freckles across his nose and an earnestness that showed in every hurried step. Porter nodded and disappeared into the treatment room with Bishop. Junia stood by the doorway, small fists clenched at her sides. "Please help him," she whispered to Dr. Hanlon. The veterinarian bent down just enough to meet her at eye level. "I will," she said softly. "I promise." As Bishop disappeared behind the glass doors, the clinic's hum swallowed the last echo of the storm outside. Machines beeped distantly, the heater rattled. Somewhere in the back, a frightened cat meowed, yet all Elias could hear was the fragile rasp of Bishop's last breath before they took him away. When Dr. Hanlon returned, she pushed loose strands of hair behind her ear and exhaled slowly. "It's bad," she admitted. "He's malnourished, severely stressed, and that leg wasn't just broken. It was restrained, possibly trapped, for days." Elias's stomach twisted. "This wasn't an accident," she continued, her voice hardening. "Whoever had him caused this." Junia pressed her palm to the observation window. "Daddy, was he punished for being good?" Elias swallowed. He wanted to say no. He wanted to tell her the world didn't work that way. But Bishop's condition said otherwise. While Junia kept watch over Bishop's trembling body through the glass, Elias retreated to a quiet corner of the lobby. He pulled the cheap, grimy collar from his coat pocket, the collar Reddick had strapped onto Bishop, and turned it over until he found the faint scratches on the inner rim. Numbers, worn down, deliberately filed, but still there. The K9 ID. He entered the sequence into the old departmental system on MEMS. On his phone, the result appeared instantly. Status reallocated, internal transfer, file sealed, authorization restricted. His pulse hammered, reallocated, sealed. Why would a K9 unit's file require high-level clearance? He called the one person he trusted with the truth, Arlo Beckett, an old partner long retired from the Frosthaven force. Beckett answered on the second ring, his gravelly voice carrying the weary humor of a man who'd survived more than he spoke of. "Elias, you picking up overtime at the strangest hour, or what?" "I found Bishop," Elias whispered, glancing toward Junia. "He's alive, barely, and his files sealed." Silence. Then Beckett's breath tightened. "Give me the ID." Minutes crept by. Junia rested her forehead against the glass, watching Porter adjust Bishop's IV. Then Beckett called back, his tone stripped of humor. "Elias, that file is locked behind Kincaid's clearance." Elias's jaw clenched. Deputy Chief Lauren Kincaid, stern, immaculate, ambitious enough to cut corners, yet charming enough to convince everyone he never had. A man with pepper-gray hair, polished boots, and a smile sharpened by politics, not kindness. He was known for speeches about discipline and order, yet he never tolerated questions about his personal units or special operations. Beckett continued, voice hushed as though speaking near open flame. "Rumor was Bishop sniffed out something during that warehouse sweep last year, something he wasn't supposed to, something big." The hairs on Elias's arms rose. "And then," Beckett finished, "orders came down to move the dog, private unit, no public record. Then he vanished." Elias stared through the observation window. Bishop lay curled, chest rising in shallow tremors, his bandaged leg twitching in the blanket. Junia whispered to him through the glass, as though promising him that the world wasn't as cruel as it had been. "Someone hurt him to make him disappear," Elias murmured, "and then dumped him like trash." Beckett's voice softened. "Find out what Bishop found, Elias. Someone in your department didn't want him talking." The line clicked dead. Dr. Hanlon appeared beside him, her features grave. "He's stable for now," she said, though her voice held the weight of a but she didn't want to say, in front of Junia. "He'll need surgery and rest, a lot of it." She glanced toward Junia, then back to him. "She cares about him." "She always cared," Elias said quietly. "He protected her once, years ago." Hanlon nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "Then maybe he's holding on for her." Elias stepped beside his daughter. Together they watched Bishop, separated by glass but bound by something stronger than the storm raging outside. Junia whispered, "Daddy, please don't let them hurt him again." And Elias knew. Tonight was no longer about rescuing a dog. It was about uncovering the truth Bishop had nearly died for. The first warmth Bishop felt came not from the clinic's heating vents, but from the small, trembling hand resting on his bandaged paw. When he blinked awake, the diffused glow of the recovery room lights blurred into a soft halo behind Junia Crow's face. Her berry-colored cheeks were still flushed from the cold she had battled outside, and strands of chestnut hair had escaped her purple knit hat, sticking to her temples. She leaned close, whispering with a certainty far too big for her 7-year-old body. "You're not in the dump anymore. You're with me. And Daddy, you're safe now." Bishop's response was faint, a slight curl of his spine, a twitch of the ear, bent from old injury, but then his tired muscles released, and his tail tapped once against the blanket. Not a wag, not yet, but a signal. He recognized safety when it stood this close. Dr. Mireille Hanlon, tall and sharp-boned with auburn hair tied messily at her nape, paused mid-chart as she noticed the monitors stabilize. Blood pressure easing, breathing smoothing. She'd treated hundreds of animals, but not many responded this quickly to the presence of a child. That's remarkable, she murmured, her hazel eyes widening behind thin-framed glasses. The moment she touched him, his vitals shifted. In the hallway, Elias Crow listened to Arlo Beckett's low, gravelly voice crackle through the phone. The retired officer, once stocky and mountain-shouldered but now softened by age and a life no longer lived in boots, spoke with urgency Elias hadn't heard since their nights patrolling together. Elias, the transport logs weren't just empty. They were doctored, Tid. The timestamps don't match the internal server, and the camera feed you asked me to check. Beckett paused, and Elias heard him exhale the way he always did when bracing someone for trouble. Bishop was wheeled into a storage facility, Warehouse 6C, the one under Deputy Chief Lauren Kincaid's jurisdiction. After that, the footage cuts to black. Elias leaned against the cold wall, his tall frame hunched in a way that made the shadows stretch long behind him. His blue-gray eyes, usually tired but steady, burned now with the quiet fury of a man betrayed by the institution he devoted his life to. He glanced through the glass window into the recovery room. Junior was giggling as Bishop slowly nudged his muzzle toward the strawberry yogurt cup she held teasingly inches from his nose. Bishop's movements were stiff, his bandaged hind leg elevated by a sling, but there was curiosity flickering in his gaze, something warm returning after months of darkness. The sight twisted something inside Elias. Here was his brave partner, dismissed as useless, sold like scrap, and his daughter, too pure to understand how easily the world disposed of heroes. He whispered into the phone, "If I stay quiet, they bury him again. If I speak." "You stir the hornet's nest," Beckett finished. His voice softened. "But Elias, someone in that building hurt Bishop. Someone tried to erase him. You do nothing, and they'll do it again. To him, to someone else, maybe even to you." Elias closed his eyes. Snow pelted the clinic windows like impatient fingers. He opened them again when Junior called, "Daddy, come see." Inside the room, Bishop was inching closer to her yogurt cup, his nose twitching despite the exhaustion that pinned his limbs. Junior's laughter, high, sweet, unguarded, filled the sterile air. For a moment, nothing existed except a little girl with an oversized winter coat and a K-9 who had once charged into burning buildings, now struggling to lift his head from a pillow. Elias knelt beside her, one knee creaking slightly as he lowered himself. Bishop shifted weakly, his amber brown eyes finding Elias's face, as though searching for permission, for reassurance, for the familiarity he'd once known by heart. Junior looked between them. "Daddy, he trusts us. We have to protect him." The words pierced deeper than any accusation could. Elias gently cupped Bishop's head, feeling sharp bone beneath the matted fur. "I know, sweetheart," he said, voice thick. "I won't let anyone hurt him again." But a promise to a child was one thing. A vow to uncover corruption within Frosthaven's police department was another beast entirely. The recovery room door opened quietly, and a new figure stepped inside. Nurse Valerie Penn, the night shift technician. She was a short, lean woman in her early 30s with sandy blonde hair cut into a blunt bob and pale, freckled skin flushed pink from her commute through the storm. Her uniform hung slightly loose on her thin frame, and her movements were brisk but careful, the kind of efficiency carved into those who had learned to juggle emergencies without losing their composure. Her gray-green eyes took in the scene with a hint of amusement. "He's doing better than expected," she said warmly. "He wouldn't take water from me or Porter, but the moment she walked in," she nodded toward Junior, "instant progress. Guess he's picked his person." Junior straightened proudly, brushing her mittened thumb gently over Bishop's head. Valerie continued adjusting the IV line. "We'll keep him overnight. Dr. Hanlon wants imaging tomorrow morning. There's swelling around the hip we need to monitor." Elias forced himself to focus. "Thank you, both of you." Valerie gave a small smile. "You can stay in the family room tonight. Storm's too rough to send anyone home anyway." When she left, Elias sat down beside Junia, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of Bishop's breathing. The truth was creeping together like pieces of a puzzle he wished didn't exist. Bishop had been taken to a warehouse under Kincaid's control. His transport logs were falsified. His injuries matched the kind inflicted by prolonged restraint. And Reddick Morrow, the ragged man at the beam dump, had been too nervous, too defensive. Someone had used Bishop. Someone had punished him, and someone assumed no one would ever notice a forgotten K9 thrown into the snow. Elias stroked Bishop's neck, careful to avoid the raw patches. The shepherd closed his eyes briefly, leaning into the touch. He looked at Junia, her small hand resting protectively on Bishop's bandage. She didn't understand the politics, the danger, the storm he was about to step into, but she understood this. Someone had hurt someone good. That was all she needed to choose a side, and that was all Elias needed to make his decision. He straightened slowly, resolve settling into the lines of his face like frost on glass. If he stayed silent, Bishop's suffering would be erased. If he spoke the truth, Kincaid's network of lies might finally crack. He wasn't choosing as an officer, he was choosing as a father. Elias Crow would not let his daughter grow up in a town where people threw heroes into the trash and called it protocol. The storms over Frosthaven did not ease in the days that followed. Snow kept drifting down in thick, gentle veils, cloaking the town beneath an endless sheet of white. Yet inside the Frosthaven Police Department, the coldest thing was not the weather, it was the sudden stillness that came when internal affairs agents walked through the doors. Elias Crow watched from the far end of the hallway, his tall frame rigid beneath the fluorescent lights, as two state investigators passed by. Their dark coats were dusted with melting snow, their badges gleaming like small shards of ice. They spoke little, but the air shifted around them with the heavy silence of consequences long overdue. One of them, Agent Leora Dane, was a woman in her late 30s with short black hair cropped close to her jawline, sharp cheekbones, and deep brown skin that contrasted strikingly against the pale winter light. Her dark eyes missed nothing. They swept across each detail with the precision of someone trained to see through lies long before anyone opened their mouth. She moved with quiet confidence, the kind born from years of facing down corruption in towns just like Frosthaven. The second investigator, Gregory Holt, was older, mid-50s, with a salt and pepper beard trimmed neatly against a square jaw. His posture was rigid, a relic of decades spent in military police before internal affairs, and his voice carried a restrained patience that only appeared in those who had learned to live through bureaucratic storms without losing their temper. They both stopped in front of Elias. "Officer Crow," Agent Dane said, her tone calm but weighted. "We've reviewed the initial findings. What was done to your K9 partner is extensive," Gregory Holt added, "and deliberate." Elias nodded, jaw tight. Behind his eyes, memories flashed like sparks. Bishop collapsing in the snow, the trembling breaths, the signs of restraint carved into his skin. And beyond that, Junia's small hand resting on Bishop's paw, her face filled with fear and hope in equal measure. "What happens now?" Elias asked. Dane opened a folder. Inside were printed photographs of falsified logs, images from the altered surveillance feeds, and Bishop's medical report. She tapped one page with a gloved finger. "Deputy Chief Lauren Kincaid is being placed on administrative suspension, effective immediately. And criminal charges will follow," Holt said quietly. "Trafficking, destruction of evidence, animal cruelty, falsification of reports, and conspiracy." The words landed with a weight Elias felt all the way into his ribs. Kincaid, not just negligent, but orchestrating a criminal scheme under everyone's noses. And Bishop had simply done his job too well. "Your testimony will be needed," Holt continued, "and your daughter's statement, though optional, could support the timeline." "No," Elias said firmly. "Junia will not be dragged into this. Bishop suffered enough for doing the right thing. My daughter doesn't need to pay that price." Agent Dane studied him a moment, then nodded with respect. "Understood." When they left, a strange quiet settled in the corridor, lighter, not heavier. A weight was being lifted from the town, piece by piece, truth by truth. Back at the Crow home, the snow in the backyard lay untouched, except for the trail of small footprints and a line of lopsided paw prints stamped beside them. It had been a week since Bishop's surgery, and he was finally strong enough to walk short distances. His injured leg was supported in a firm brace, and though he balanced mostly on 3 legs, he moved with the determination of a soldier relearning the shape of duty. Junia ran a short distance ahead, bundled in her oversized winter coat, her purple knit hat bouncing with each step. She slowed her pace every few strides, turning back to encourage him. "Come on, Bishop, you're doing it. You're really doing it." Bishop paused, panting softly, his amber eyes brightening with each word she spoke. His dark coat was still patchy from months of neglect, but the warmth of Elias's house and Junia's constant affection had given it a new sheen. He pushed forward, lifting his braced legs slightly, and followed her, step by determined step. On the porch, Elias sat watching them. The late winter air was crisp but not biting. Snowmelt dripped from the gutters in soft, rhythmic beats. His face, usually shadowed by worry, had softened into something gentler. Relief, pride, a kind of peace he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Internal affairs had moved quickly. Kincaid had been arrested 2 days earlier. Several officers involved in his scheme were under investigation, and a handful of those who had turned a blind eye were now coming forward, afraid but finally willing to speak the truth. The storm was far from over, but justice had begun its slow, steady thaw. Junia stopped running and turned to Elias. "Daddy," she called, her breath forming clouds. "Now that Bishop is getting better, is he still a police dog, or is he ours?" Elias walked down the porch steps, joining them in the snow. He knelt beside Bishop, running a hand gently along the shepherd's neck, careful to avoid the healing scars. Bishop leaned into him, closing his eyes briefly in contentment. "Bishop is still a hero," Elias said, "a police hero, but heroes need a place to rest, a home, a family." Junia's face lit up entirely, her smile widening until her dimples appeared. "So he can stay?" she asked. "He already has," Elias replied softly. Bishop gave a quiet huff, nudging Elias's shoulder with the top of his head, as if to confirm the declaration with his own signature. Junia giggled and immediately slipped between them, wrapping her small arms around both her father and the dog. Elias wrapped one strong arm around her while resting the other gently across Bishop's back. They stood like that, 3 hearts pressed together, while the last winter wind slid softly across Frosthaven. The backyard was silent except for Junia's giggle, Bishop's warm breath, and the steady, grounded presence of Elias Crow, a father who finally understood what justice meant, not loud retribution, but the simple act of refusing to abandon what was good. And in that small, snow-covered yard, where a German shepherd once discarded for $1 now stood loved and protected, Frosthaven began to heal. In the quiet melt of Frosthaven's last snow, as Bishop rested his head in the lap of the little girl who saved him, it became clear that some miracles do not arrive with thunder, nor with flashes of light. Sometimes they come on 3 trembling legs, carrying scars the world tried to hide. Sometimes they come in the form of a child's kindness so pure it softens the hardest truths. And sometimes they come when a weary father finally refuses to let darkness decide the fate of the innocent. What happened to Bishop was cruel. What saved him was not strength or law, it was love, persistence, and the mysterious way God places the right people in the right place at the right moment. Maybe that is the quiet miracle we often forget. Every day we walk past someone, human or animal, who carries pain we cannot see. And every day we are given a choice, to turn away or to kneel down like Junia did and "You're safe now." May we all remember that small acts of compassion can break chains stronger than steel. May we remember that God's grace often arrives disguised as second chances. And may Bishop's journey remind us that no life is ever too broken for redemption. If this story touched your heart today, I invite you to share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment about your own miracle moments and subscribe so we can continue telling stories that remind the world of the goodness still left in it. May God bless you, protect your home, and may He guide your footsteps, just as He guided Bishop back into the arms of the family who never stopped needing him. Amen.